And then I walk in and I just remember like being under the disco ball, surrounded by men of all ages. And I loved feeling like a total piece of meat. I loved it.
Hello, I am Kay Anderson, and you are listening to Lost Spaces, the podcast that mourns the death of queer nightlife. Every episode, I talk to a different person about a venue from their past, the memories that they created there, and the people that they used to know. So, most of the spaces that we talk about on this show closed because they were no longer making a profit, or, the owner just decided that they wanted a bit of a change and closed up shop. What we've never done is talk about a venue that stopped existing because it was knocked down by a tornado. Until now, that is. Sorry, I shouldn't sound excited because it's kind of like horrendous and hideous, but it's kind of exciting as well. This week's guest is singer-songwriter Dylan Rice, who grew up in Salt Lake City. And although he went away for university, whenever he would return to visit, he would make sure that he went to the Sun Tavern, a place that originally opened in the 70s, like full-on disco era, and one of the only safe spaces for queer people in the entire conservative state of Utah. We talked all about Mormons, because of course we're going to talk about Mormons. I mean, he grew up in Salt Lake City, right? Developing crushes on teachers and leaning into the ridiculousness of flirting. Oh, and before we get going, a very quick favor. If you happen to be listening to this on Spotify, would you be an absolute dear and go to the podcast landing page in the app and rate this show 5 stars? It'll only take 30 seconds and you don't need to write a review or anything like that. And well, it would make me feel popular and it would just kind of make my day, right? Great, let's get into it.
Salt Lake City in the 80s was a fairly hostile and toxic place for queer people. And then there was this other strike against me, which was not being Mormon. We were Episcopalian or Anglican, I guess, in UK, right? Which anywhere else in the country is like super boring, like common. But in Salt Lake at that time, some of my friends in the playground were like, what is that? What is that religion? That's never heard of that before. That's weird. So it was a challenging time to grow up. I didn't see positive gay culture represented any time when I was a kid. I had no sort of gay mentors or not even any relatives or friends of relatives that I could really look up to. I mean, I would watch sitcoms and see like Jim J. Bullock and he was this clown and, but it's like, it just was not something that was at the forefront of being anything normal. It was actually really frightening. Queer identity is like depraved. It's not something you talk about. It's mental illness or it's a death sentence because you're going to get beat up or killed or you're going to get AIDS and die. There was no sort of pathway or aspirational sort of normal model for me. As a kid. So, my coping mechanism was throwing myself into art, like, writing music, writing poetry, singing, gravitating towards girls because girls were really accepting of effeminate boys.
That rings a few bells, yeah.
Yeah.
And so when you say not having any role models as a kid, what age range are you talking about? Like, when did you start to think, oh, I may not be heterosexual?
Well, I feel like I had the feelings of being different and being attracted towards boys and men. I feel like that was when I was maybe 8 or 9.
Mm-hmm.
Things like being terrified walking into a locker room because I might want to like stare.
More bells are ringing. Yeah.
I had crushes on teachers, but it was something that I was deeply afraid of and ashamed of. And
But when you say like crushes on teachers,
mm-hmm.
do you mean like you just had a bit of a fascination with particular teachers or a bit of a fixation, or do you mean it was like an actual crush?
I mean, I don't know. It was a healthy crush. It was just kind of like any, heterosexual sort of crush. They were never gay, at least to my knowledge. And so it was sort of like this safe distance where it was like, oh yeah, they're really handsome and smart. And someday I would like to be as handsome and smart as they are.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Like, before you recognize your sexuality, sometimes you just have a very keen interest in things and people, and you don't necessarily join the dots.
Yeah, I definitely was not connecting the dots there. And I tried dating girls, and actually I think to some extent I was like emotionally attracted to some of the girls, and there was definitely sensuality there, sensual attraction, but it was certainly just experimental. Nothing really lasted because I just have no interest right now. Sorry. It was like situational heterosexuality. What happens in the prison? It was like the opposite of prison for me. It's like I was at a heterosexual prison.
I'm sure those girls would love to hear you say that about them.
No, we laugh about it. No, we're all really good friends now. It's like so funny to think back.
And so you said earlier that you were always aware that you were a bit different to everyone else. Was everyone else aware that you were a bit different to them?
Yeah, I think that, it's funny, like, as an adult now and talking to my family, they were like, yeah, we knew that you were, like, really gentle and creative and...
which are code words.
All these codes, right? They knew that I was a creative, gentle soul, sensitive soul. But no one was like, when I came out to them, was like, oh, I knew it. Oh my God. Like, you were on fire. Like I wasn't one of those.
Finally.
Yeah, it was not like that. But it was also this like, oh, well, you know what? I'm not surprised.
Uh-huh.
Now I'm in my 40s, so that was 35 years ago or something, or 30 plus years ago. So I feel like now in 2022, it would be like, oh, honey, we knew. Like it would be something like that, or they might even be like, hey, do you like boys?
I've got this pamphlet here. Would you be interested in reading it?
Well, there's just there's so much awareness now, which is good.
Do you ever feel a bit annoyed? That might not be the right word, but like a bit like the current generation or people who are teenagers now are like just having this really easy ride.
Oh, definitely. I'm certainly jealous. I would be lying to say that I wasn't. Yeah, I mean, I can't help the situation I was born into. No one can help that. You are in the circumstance you're in. And for me to dwell on that, it would just be kind of fruitless. Like, I can't turn back the clock and change what happened. But I can certainly be a positive role model for young queer people and be a support system.
And you can certainly look down on them with disdain as well. I mean, that's not hurting anyone, right?
For me, I'm upset about, like, I was terrified of getting HIV at age, when I came out. So I came out when I was 19. Sort of actually came out as bisexual, and then I came out sort of more gay as when I was 20. And I just spent years being just terrified of getting it. And now, obviously, there's been so many advances in medicine, but also just with these drugs that will protect people from even getting it. I think, wow, like if I had had access to that when I was 20, it would have been so different.
Yeah, I feel really like, in lots of ways, robbed of intimacy, right? Like, because I'm of an age where when I came out, everyone was like, oh, yeah, okay, well, we accept that you're gay, but just don't get AIDS and die. And so whenever I was with anyone and having, frolicking sexual experiences, it was always in the back of my mind, like, oh, be careful. Oh, you've got to not trust this person. Oh, you've got to make sure that this doesn't happen. And yeah, it just
totally.
prevented me living in those moments. But I think for me, the other thing about, whilst we're moaning about the younger generation, and this is definitely, an outsider looking in perspective, so I might be totally wrong when I say this, but it appears as though they are all living without shame.
Yeah,
and when I just think about how much my shame has robbed me of like self-esteem, self-confidence, and the bravery to do certain things, that's when I get a bit like, oh, for fuck's sake.
I know. I definitely have been dealing with shame and self-loathing issues, feeling, like I couldn't be my authentic self growing up. And, but I'm in a very safe environment right now where I am with, my family is really supportive. I'm in one of the gayest places on earth, San Francisco. So I feel like I have the resources and the tools and the support system to deal with it. But yeah, it's definitely something I always work on. For me, it's like for me to dwell on the fact that they have it easier doesn't really help me. I can only just work on myself and be glad that the world is changing for the better. But, we still have really conservative, extremist situation here in the United States. I mean, just recently, these Nazis were threatening like a gay pride march in Idaho. It's like, really?
Yeah, which is why I kind of acknowledge that it's me putting my own lens on it, and that it might not be that way at all. They might still have shame seeping in because of the actions of all of these people. Horrible, hideous people. Yeah.
We still have a ways to go, but I'm inspired by the youth. I think that there's, especially just this normalizing of sort of gender fluidity and gender identity is really exciting. And just understanding that gray areas are fine. You don't need to define someone. I mean, if I someday want to marry a woman, like, okay, I probably won't. But, I mean, you never know. It's like, that's my right,
Is this more situational heterosexuality?
Yeah.
So you came out at 19.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like?
It was out-of-body, terrifying, thrilling, refreshing, clarifying. So I went away to college. I went to Northwestern, which is outside of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And I was around all of these really confident, successful, productive, openly gay people, openly queer people.
Horrible.
I know.
Confident.
And I was like, well, they're doing well and they're being authentic, and I really like the attention that they give me. And
wait, what kind of attention are we talking about?
Yeah, I lived in the arts dorm, which if that's pretty clear, right? It's like, and so I was like, well, I think I'm bi. That's it. Yeah, I'm bi. Because I was dating women, and I like to kiss women. Like they were really
soft.
Soft, yeah, very soft, exactly. But just I really liked their personalities, and I think there was also this like clinging to the American dream of marrying a woman and having that normal life, quote unquote. Uh-huh. So it was like, oh well, I can still cling on to that, but also explore this other side. And then as I started dating more men on campus, I said boys. I guess we were men, but I felt like we were boys.
Well, it's creepy if you say you were dating boys.
I know. Right? We were actually men, but it just, I would say boys. I still say boys, actually, even though I'm talking about men. But that's another situation.
Men, children.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Anyway, the people.
People, yeah. So I just realized, I was like, yeah, you know what? This feels really right. Really am not interested in women. I really want to go see where this goes. So I had to come out to myself, and I had to come out in a safe space in college, away from my family. And my family, I love my family, and they've been great. But I think there was still this like terror.
Yeah, of course.
Like, well, I might disappoint them. They might think I don't know. I was just, when you're young and insecure and terrified, you don't always think clearly. And like, I look back and I'm like, my family was so supportive, you know? But for me, coming out was like coming out to myself in a safe space in college and then coming out again to my Salt Lake City friends and family. And it felt like that was a different journey because it was being very vulnerable, and I was like the first person in my family to do that, like even my extended family, to like really come out and just say, hey, this is who I am.
And so was it like you coming back from term time, it was a holiday and you
Yeah.
had in your mind, like, when I go back, I'm going to come out and I'm going to tell everyone?
Yeah, I'd been mentally preparing. So it was like summer break, and I was working at a neighborhood coffee shop and meeting a lot of queer people at the coffee shop and having all these new queer connections. And just at some point feeling the weight of the secret, because I was actually out to my coffee shop friends even before I would tell my family. So I was like, all right, I feel like I'm leading a double life. And so, it was a iterative process of telling my closest friends, getting confidence, telling my family, and it was terrifying, but it was so freeing, really. And I was really met with just lots of love and support. Some concern about, HIV and about the hostile climate in Salt Lake, about being, harassed or beat up or something like that. So there was that still there, but it was just a short-lived kind of anxiety that my family had, and they basically were like, you know what, we're so happy for you. And like I would bring boyfriends home, and they would meet my boyfriends in Chicago, and they would come visit me. So, it was really it was a beautiful thing. But
And so being in Chicago, I'm going to completely generalize now. So, like,
sure.
strap in. Being in Chicago, which is pretty liberal, whilst you were at university, and then coming back to Salt Lake City for summer holidays and whatnot, what was that like?
So when I was in college, I was in Evanston, which is a small college town next to Chicago, and I didn't take full advantage of the Chicago queer scene when I was in college. I was still kind of like in my own campus world.
Yeah, but you were surrounded by arts majors.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm just saying, like for me, I was in a very queer friendly environment, but it was like a very sort of like elite, progressive Fantasyland environment where I could just,
Oh, okay.
because it was like this. Northwestern is a beautiful campus with so much great extracurricular activity, and so I didn't really need Chicago's liberal progressiveness. I was in my own sort of fantasy land of like super liberal. So anyway,
But is that because there were enough boys to snog on campus?
oh yeah,
Okay, all
there
right,
was
cool.
a plethora.
A bevy. Of
Yeah,
boys,
exactly.
yes.
A deluge. So you come from this like very sort of rarefied, progressive bubble of queer normalcy, and then you go back to Salt Lake. I felt like I had to sort of behaviorally kind of like sort of rein it in a little bit. And there was, queer coffee shops in Salt Lake, obviously, queer bars, but they were compartmentalized zones of safety.
Yeah.
Whereas anywhere else, I would never hold a guy's hand, kiss a guy on the street or sidewalk in a grocery store. That was not something I was ever going to do. I think of them as zones, or safe zones that I would jump between. And then when I wasn't in the safe zone, I was watching my body language, like, am I walking in an effeminate way, or just subtle things, like if someone is asking me about who I'm dating and I don't know them very well, or I would deflect.
Keep it vague. Yeah. It's super interesting, isn't it? I think about it in terms of like holding your breath, and it feels like when you're in your hometown or a similar type of environment, that you're just clenched the entire time. Your body is just pulling into itself, trying to...
No, it is a body thing. It is you're not just your mind, but your whole body, I think, sort of clenches. But it's about survival, or it's about reducing conflict. And, I think that behavioral sort of clenching is, I think, a way to kind of like grease the wheels and make other people feel comfortable, which is really sad.
Yeah.
Like...
But behavioral clenching is a good name for a band.
So there's that. Kind of feels like psychobabble, right? Or my master's thesis or something. Behavioral clenching, navigating hostile binary, whatever. I'm not even,
And so should we talk about some of the zones, or one in particular?
Let's do it.
So the Sun, well, it's the Sun Tavern, isn't it? But everyone calls it the Sun.
Yeah, but the Sun is the name. Yeah.
Was one of the only queer bars in the city.
And the state.
And should we just get out of the way this whole thing about the tornado? Because I'm dying to talk about it.
Totally. Well, maybe I should give some background on the significance of the Sun, just so our listeners know.
Okay.
But not too much background, because I want to get to the tornado right away. So the Sun is known as sort of Utah's first gay disco, with a true disco ball. And it opened in the early 70s on the west side of town, which is, the wrong side of the tracks, lots of warehouses. And then it moved again in the early 80s to this other location nearby. But it had this reputation as being like the gay dance club to go to for locals and for visitors.
So was it one of those places that like everyone in your high school knew about the Sun and everyone talked about it in a derogatory way?
And it was a joke in high school. It's oh, I'll see you at the Sun later, you big fag. Yeah. So it's like this, historic place that was, pioneering gay disco in Utah. Legendary, known around the region, safe space for queer people. So with that in mind, in August of 1999, a freak tornado hit Salt Lake City. Now, tornadoes don't happen in Salt Lake City really very often. I think the last time it happened was in the 60s. And so, it's not...
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it was this freak tornado that touched down right where the Sun was. It destroyed the Sun, and it traveled towards the Mormon temple, but missed Mormon temple by a block or two, and destroyed two other really important cruising places in Salt Lake City, which I didn't tell you this, but one of them was the Deseret Gym, which was known, the locker rooms were known for being very, very cruisy. The other one was a wooded or pine tree covered area called Memory Grove, which had a lot of cruising. So destroyed those places and missed the Mormon temple. And the Sun never reopened, not because of sort of financing, but get this, because of zoning. They were grandfathered in as a establishment that didn't need to have on-site parking.
Okay.
And then when they were going to rebuild, all of a sudden, they were required to have on-site parking. And so it just didn't make sense. The footprint was not big enough to justify having a parking lot. And so they got hit with zoning. Isn't that terrible?
That's awful.
I know.
Time for a quick ad break. So, as you know, this show is all about spaces. And one of the things that I am particularly interested in exploring is what are the ingredients to a successful space? Is it about the host? Is it about the people who happen to be there? Is it about the ground rules? Or is it a magical combination of all of the above plus a little bit more? Well, luckily, I have been given the opportunity to find out. I have recently partnered with Spaces, the new group chat app for queer communities. On Spaces, users can set up their own space within the app, and the one that I have set up is called Lost Queer Spaces, where I will be sharing a little more insight from every episode of this show, but I will also be throwing in some vintage nightclub posters, throwback songs, and a whole heap of embarrassing photos from sweaty nights out clubbing. If you want to know more, all you need to do is find Spaces in the App Store, download it, and set up your profile. And don't worry if you're on the go at the moment, I will make sure to include more details as well as a link in the show notes for this episode. So let's get back to the show, but I hope to see you very, very soon on Spaces.
I mean, it was a really scary time. I mean, it killed one person and then it injured like 100 people. And so it was a very scary phenomenon that people still talk about to this day.
But the lesson is space out your cruising areas.
Right? Diversify. Right. Right, exactly.
Sorry, I'm not making a joke of this.
No. I mean, it was like literally and figuratively the perfect storm, you know?
But anyway, so we're not here to talk about the tornado.
Yeah.
We're not here to talk about the place being blown down.
Exactly.
We're here to talk about your time there. Mm-hmm. So do you remember the very first time you ever went there?
I do. It was surreal. So the building itself is windowless, as many queer bars were back in the 70s and 80s, because it was this very shameful, hidden thing, right? So I was like terrified going in, but I had some gay friends that I met through the coffee shop that I worked at that had been there, and they were a little older, and so they were more confident. So I was sort of like tagging along with them, and
Had you asked them?
Yeah, well, they were like, "Hey, come to the Sun," and I was like, "Oh, what?" You know, and I didn't tell any of my family that I was going, because it was my sort of experiment. It was my journey to have and to see.
Do you remember the lie you told them?
I don't think I told a lie. I just think I just withheld the information.
Just going out now.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah. I mean, I was like, you know, I didn't get into trouble. You know, I was a very sort of well-behaved kid, you know, so I wasn't like under the magnifying glass, you know, but so I went in, and I remember, so at the time, every bar in Utah had a membership requirement.
Okay, yeah.
And so they did away with that, but they were like, "Are you a member?" And I was like, "No." They were like, "Well, you can buy a temporary membership right now for $5. You know, just like how silly it was. So I was like, whatever. And then I walk in, and I just remember like being under the disco ball, surrounded by men of all ages. And I loved feeling like a total piece of meat. I loved it. I just was like absorbing this attention. And it was, you know, we talk about compartmentalizing, right? So it was like walking into this. Have you ever seen Star Trek: The Next Generation?
No.
Well, okay. Well, there's this technology in Star Trek where it's called the holodeck.
Okay.
And it's this virtual reality zone where they walk into. So if you're on this spaceship and you're like, I want to go to the woods, the forest.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it was like walking into the holodeck. because like you leave behind the oppressive, suppressive Salt Lake City culture.
And you say, I want to be in a room full of half-naked men.
Yeah. And you walk in, and it's like, it was thrilling. I could, you know, be Queenie if I wanted to. I could hug and kiss a guy if I wanted to. I loved to dance flamboyantly. Like I was doing this like mix of like jazzercise with disco and sort of punk rock moshing. Like it was this really kind of confused, weird thing I was doing, but I loved it. And
you know what my follow-up question is going to be, don't you?
What music I was listening to?
No, I want a demonstration.
Oh. I mean, I'm tethered to my earbuds right now, so I can't do it for you. But it's a very sort of high energy, aerobic, like kind of belly dancey jumpy kind of dance. I don't know. I have a cafeteria style way of dancing, but it's definitely informed by a lot of disco and jumping up and down, I guess. So I was in heaven. They would play a lot of the hits from the 80s. They would play like Susie and the Banshees, and they would play Depeche Mode, and I was like so into that. But the bigger thing was like I felt like a grown up. I felt like, you know what, I'm becoming a independent man, and I can get someone's number if I want, or I don't have to. But I also didn't have, like, as you get older, like, things get more complicated in life and you start thinking about deep, heavy shit. At that time, I was just, like, really excited about, like, flirting and cruising. Like, oh my gosh, cruising. I learned how to cruise at the Sun.
In the toilets, I hope.
Well, no, it was not, like, a super furtive kind of cruising. It was, like, non-creepy cruising. Does that make sense? Oh my gosh, I'm so judgy. I'm judging cruising right now. That's super judgy. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I still have this like problem. So,
so if we're talking about a continuum where
right.
On one end there's flirting, on one end there's like, oh hey stranger, here's my penis. Don't worry about telling me your name. You're talking about somewhere in the middle.
Oh yeah, I was so not at that point where it's like anonymous in the woods or anything. I wasn't there. I was,
but it's like a more heightened flirting.
Yeah, heightened flirt. That's a great way to put it. Heightened flirting. So we didn't have the apps, right? At that time. Mm-hmm. So you flirted with someone, you cruised someone in person, and that was like a thing. And so for me, it was like eye contact was such a huge way of signaling. And I remember being terrified of giving eye contact to guys in other contexts, other environments. But at the Sun, I was like, you know what? They're here for the same reason I'm here. They want to meet and mingle. And so when the music's really loud, eye contact was a great way to signal. And I started out as being kind of like the quick sort of smiling with the eyes, for like 5 seconds and then looking away and then doing it, and then just progressed to be like full on like 20 seconds. Like 20 seconds was like, whoa, that's a lot for me. And then I would get the courage to go and talk to them, and there were golf pencils on, on the bar, so you could, no cell phones, right?
They were taking care of everyone. Mm-hmm. Well, and you very quickly then were the person who was like, yep, I'm going to flirt. I'm going to be the one that initiates conversation. You weren't just like a chicken shit like me who was like, I'm just going to stand here and hope someone talks to me.
Yeah, I mean, it was just like, if I feel like talking to someone, I will. If I don't, I won't. But I think also having a couple rum and cokes helped some of that confidence, some of the liquid confidence. There wasn't this pressure to hook up with strangers. I was still pretty green. I was a baby gay. I just really wanted to kiss a lot of boys. I was sort of, honestly, I was pretty green.
And snogging on the dance floor is a lot of fun, isn't it?
Yeah. And just this like thrill of like feeling like I'm the new gay in town or something, like this new world is opening up for me.
Okay, can we do a little bit of role play?
Sure.
So I want to find out what your flirting style is like. So let's say I'm over here, this Mook machine's just enveloped the dance floor, and you have made eye contact with me a few times, and you've just come over to introduce yourself. What's your pickup line?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I don't think it was anything very...
Don't overthink it, or I'm going to walk away.
I know, please don't walk away. Please stay with me. No, I think I was just like, hey, what's up? I'm Dylan. I'm from Chicago or something. It was like signaling like
bulletproof.
Like bulletproof.
So you weren't like, I'm here for a good time, not a long time.
Yeah, I didn't have the kind of savvy, to say something completely witty. It was more about like the eye contact and then dancing up close to them. But yeah, I mean, dance floor flirting is just like, I don't know, I feel like you can't say anything that's really valuable because it's just like you have drinks in you and it's loud, and I feel like it's more about the visual. signaling.
So it's what you say with your eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what you're saying.
For me, a really beautiful smile was a lot more sexy than this like intense, almost doomsday stare that sometimes happens when you flirt or cruise with someone.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, are you going to hurt me? Are you going to like,
But it's what you've learned from porn.
Yeah,
It's what
exactly,
you've learned
right.
from, like, oh, you've got to look brooding.
Yeah,
and
brooding,
dramatic.
right.
Not like, hi.
Yeah, I had a sunny disposition, and I was more interested in like sort of fun flirting on the dance floor. But there's a place for brooding. That was not my style at the time.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know if there is a place for brooding. I find it just so, like, boring.
Well, I think if you're like a one-trick pony where you're like, yeah, I'm gonna stare at you and look like I'm dying inside, and that's kind of like, all right, come on.
Yeah, it's when people don't lean into the ridiculousness of it all. Like, it is a really stupid thing to do, flirt, because you're trying to employ a number of sophisticated, nuanced movements to signal your interest rather than just being like, hey, I'm interested in you. Are you interested in me? And so, like, the whole thing is this put on peacocking. And for people to just like take that seriously and not realize the ridiculousness of it is, a bit weird for me.
Yeah, I start to crack up if someone's like still really serious. Like, they can't. It's just not my thing. I need some levity. I need some laughter and playfulness because life is hard enough,
Oh, hard. I see what you did.
Oh. Boom, boom.
So, okay. So this is interesting for me to hear. So on your first night there was the nerves before you went in. But then when you went in, you were like, I'm all in.
Yeah, I mean, I had friends to lean on.
Yeah.
But it was definitely a portal into a world of freedom, albeit a limited sort of gated freedom, surrounded by four walls.
Yeah.
It basically was like, this is a transformational place where people are their authentic selves and they are having profound connections with other people and they are thriving without the specter of shame. So call it an escape, but I also think of it as being not necessarily being an escape, as being a entrance into safety, an entrance into happiness.
Yeah. And a reprieve.
Yeah, reprieve is a great word. Yeah, like relief for a few hours.
Yeah. So I'm just going to pick up on some of the words you've just used. Profound connections.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have any profound connections? Did you use the golf pencils to write your phone number down for anyone profound?
No one that I even remember really that well. I mean, I did give my number out and I did go on a couple dates, but so I hate to be disappointing in that it wasn't about meeting a profound connection. I think it was more about a profound connection with community.
Okay, well, I've made it sound dirtier than I mean it to be. Like, all I mean is there anyone you remember?
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely, yeah. One of my favorite memories is this guy who lived in New York City, but he was there visiting family. He was this sophisticate, like this, art lover who was highly successful on the board of all these museums. And I look back and I think he was actually kind of reserved. Like he wasn't out to a lot of people in Salt Lake, but he was older. He was like 15 years older. And I was really taken with his intelligence and his handsomeness, but I was also just taken with, it felt like a sort of rite of passage to like go out with an older guy. Because I had only been dating guys on campus. I just felt like a grown-up. I was like, yeah, this is, like, he thinks I am interesting enough and mature enough to talk to. Like, it actually had some depth to it. So I feel like he's a strong, fond memory.
And was that like a summer romance then?
Yeah. But honestly, I don't know where he is now. But it was like, yeah, you know what? I'm a man and I can I can be intergenerational. I don't know. Who knows what his motivation was? Maybe he was just like, oh my gosh, this young green thing. I don't know. I like to think that there was something substantive in his mind. Because I thought he was really compelling. I was just like, but he was a little bit more reserved. So maybe that, to me, looking back, maybe that was kind of a safe, because he wasn't queeny, like he was kind of butch, and I felt safe. And I look back, I kind of roll my eyes at myself. I'm like, oh, come on, I was like.
What do you mean, like if you were seen out in public with him, it was safe?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. I'm not proud of that. Now I sort of laugh. I'm like, oh God, I was like so afraid of what people thought of me. But at the time, I think it was the right sort of mix of like personality, sort of behavioral norms, and his looks. It was real, and his age. I was like, yeah, wow, he's so together and mature.
You talked about it as being a rite of passage with this intergenerational type relationship.
Yeah.
Do you think that's just something about the queer community, or do you think that's just everyone experiments with that?
I think that, just talking to my queer friends, I feel like everyone has experimented with older or younger, depending on where they are in their life. What I've noticed is that I feel like in the queer community, there's much less of a stigma of intergenerational relationships. Mm-hmm. It could be a romantic relationship. It could be just a platonic. I feel like when I started going to gay bars in my 20s, I just felt like I met so many people who were quite a bit older than I was, and they would treat me like an equal. And that was a very powerful thing. And, I'm not heterosexual. I don't know if straight people have that same experience, but it just felt like it was normalized to like, oh yeah, I have a really good friend who's 20 years older than I am, and we hang out at the bar together. And that was my experience, especially in Chicago, and then now in San Francisco. And now in San Francisco, like daddies are a thing, so I'm like, woohoo! Like, daddies with a paunch is a very desirable thing in San Francisco, and maybe even elsewhere.
And so you're like leaning into it.
Yeah, I'm leaning into it.
So if someone comes up to you and says, hey, daddy, are you not just instantly repulsed?
I'm not.
Sorry, you can tell I'm working through my own issues here.
Well, if someone said old man, I'd probably be upset by that. Hey, grandpa. No, that would be very upsetting.
What about papa?
Papa that would not be okay with me. I'd be like, stop right there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, papa sounds too old.
So it goes daddy, papa, grandpa. Old man? No, where does old man sit?
Old man and grandpa are on the same level.
Okay. Oh, see, I think papa's better.
Really?
I still wouldn't want to be called papa, but there's something, it's kind of like soft and sweet.
Interesting.
Really
well,
like
maybe
that.
That's an American/British difference.
Yeah, I think it's just me.
Because papa here, I think, implies older. I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's the wisest Smurf.
True.
So you've got that going for you.
Well, I find the whole like animal metaphors to be hilarious. So like wolves are a thing. Like if you're a wolf, you're like kind of an older daddy.
Yeah, if you're a silver wolf, yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, silver fox was the first. Silver fox. That was kind of like, that wasn't a queer thing. That was just like any sort of gentleman with silver hair that was maybe over 55 or something. But now it's like the wolf. I'm looking for some new animals. Like I want to be a giraffe or something. Like I want to be something different.
Yeah, I'm happy just being a sloth.
Oh yeah, I could be a sloth too.
And there's not that much difference between some of them. I mean, maybe there is, and maybe I'm just a very ignorant outsider, but like a cub and a wolf and a fox and an otter, like what are the differences?
It's just about your body makeup, your body type. It's kind of dumb.
So what's the difference?
So I'm glad you're not asking me about colored hankies, because that's where I would completely get lost. So otters, you are relatively skinny.
You're long.
You're longer, you're relatively skinny, and you have more body hair than not.
Yeah, and a big tail.
Oh, yeah. There's also pups. Pups, yeah.
Oh, pups.
Pups are another one.
Oh, God, yeah, of course.
But yeah, so I think pups is more of a kink fetish thing. So otters, I explained.
Okay, so back to the otters, wolves,
Yeah,
foxes.
A wolf is like a furry,
Cubs.
older gay man.
Who's not a bear.
Who's not a bear. Correct.
But can you be a bear and a wolf?
I think you can. I think you totally can. Yeah, I'm just looking for some new animals at this point. Like, I'm taking suggestions, ready to break out.
What do you relate most to? I feel like there's an online quiz that you should take.
I'm sure there's like a lot of blogs that have explored this that I need to look into. I think I identify with dogs.
Okay.
Because I'm really loyal, and I love to cuddle, and I love to play. But I'm not a pup. So like maybe it's like I need to find like my right dog breed.
Like a schnauzer.
Yeah.
What is a schnauzer? I just think it's fun to say.
Actually, I'm not a schnauzer. Schnauzers are they're cute, but they're just really high strung all the time. And
Oh, okay.
I'm kind of like a spaniel lab mix or something.
Oh my God, I just love it if cockapoo is the next thing.
Yeah.
Gay men start describing themselves as, I'm a cockapoo.
I'm all about that, because that really resonates with me. I'd be like, yeah, for sure. Or like, you're a Doberman. You're a Doberman. Like, for sure. I get that.
Okay, so shall we go back
Yes.
to the bar?
Yes.
So you had a bit of an interesting relationship with it in that it wasn't your regular, it wasn't the place that you always went because you were living in a different state on the other side of the country. But whenever you would come back, you would go there.
Mm-hmm.
And was it something that you were excited about doing when you came back to town? Or was it just something that, because there were so few options, that was the place that you went?
No, it was definitely a gravitational pull. It was excitement. It was almost like an empowering thing to be like, you know what, I had, it was a rough go of it growing up as a queer non-Mormon kid, but this is me taking back my life and my confidence, and I'm going to sort of exert my confidence here.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of felt therapeutic, actually. It wasn't just because, that's the only thing to do. It was definitely like, this is an important sort of catalytic place for me as an emerging queer person and an emerging adult.
And so, going back to the tornado, where were you at the time when that all happened?
I was not there. I was in Chicago at the time. My sister called me right away. She was working in a high-rise downtown. And she was like, I'm fine, but you should know there was a tornado. It's really scary and creepy and surreal. And then it wasn't until like a week or two later that I heard about the sun's demise.
And how did you hear?
I think that my girlfriends told me. So the ones that were my wing women who went with me to the sun, I think they probably told me. And just feeling like, hope, like raising a glass in memory of this beautiful place. I was just like, all right. But it did feel like this crazy sort of biblical thing that the sun was the first place the tornado hit and destroyed. Like, really? Could you have picked another place? Yeah. Tornadoes they don't listen to reason.
Well, I mean, have you ever tried?
No.
And so, what do you think Salt Lake City has lost since it lost that bar?
I think it lost one of its key sort of legacy queer spaces. So the Sun was the anchor gay nightclub during, queer liberation, during the AIDS crisis. So it lost history.
Mm. And did anyone ever find the disco ball after the tornado?
Oh my God, that's a great question. Let's just say that happened. Let's say that disco ball went up into the sky. and landed in a field somewhere. That's a wonderful image. Thank you for that.
Do you have memories of the Sun Tavern or clubbing from your own queer scene that you want to share? Well, if you do, I would love for you to get in touch. I want to create the biggest online record of queer clubbing and memories from people who were there. Go to lostspacesPodcast.com and find the section Share a Lost Space and tell me all about what it is you got up to. You can also reach out to me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, where my handle is Lost Spaces Pod. Across all three. Simple, right? Find out more about Dylan by following him on Instagram, Dylan Rice Music, and I've also included links to a few of his songs in the show notes for this episode. If you enjoyed this episode, I would really appreciate if you subscribed, took the time to leave a review, or just told another person who you think might be interested in giving it a little listen too. Word of mouth is really effective in helping me grow this show, and I appreciate every single person who takes the time to listen. I am Kay Anderson, and you have been listening to Lost Spaces.